ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark DiCarlo. Tonight my guest is Professor Dr. Swint Friday, professor at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, right?
Right.
In what? Finance, correct?
Finance.
We were talking about something before the show started. We get going and talking about the risk-taking gene. And we were talking about the fact that, you were stating that the Asian students are doing so very well in school. And I stated, yeah, I bet it was the first generation does well. And you stated that these were actually ones with visas, right? That were doing so well in school?
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at the University of Texas. The Supreme Court is listening to the affirmative action case, and you look at University of Texas and some of these top universities across the country, and they bring in some of these incredibly talented Asian students that are from China, different places where they've gone through, I guess, a very rigorous education system, and they're far better prepared when they come into these universities than our domestic students who have gone through some very suspect public schools. And I think Scalia was trying to make that point. He didn't make it very well, but
that's what I thought too. I'm not a fan of Justice Scalia, but when I read what he was trying to say, it was kind of a complicated concept that I don't think he made very well.
Right. I think the point I think he was making is we really need to beef up the quality of our public schools so that we can give these kids coming out of our high schools a chance to be successful, and the University of Texas doesn't have to dumb down the material. And he was talking about black students, but I think it's white students, Hispanic students, across the board. Our students do not come into these universities prepared to compete with the students from some of these international students that are in these top universities like Rice, University of Texas, and places like that. So I think his criticism was less racial and more of saying, hey, we need to really beef up the programs these guys are coming through so they'll be ready, but they may not be ready now. So it's an indictment of public education.
But when I had mentioned the fact that, and then I had mentioned my own experience when I had seen many immigrants who had done very well when they came over, and maybe the first generation did well. And I'm very suspicious. After that, it just seems like you have drug problems, you have alcohol problems, you got sexual problems, and then you said that there's actually an identifiable risk-taking gene.
Right.
What is that?
A gene that they've identified in these people that are, it's a calculate. They used to at first they considered it a dangerous gene because they said, it's a risk-taking gene and your propensity to take unnecessary risk. However, a little more research into it showed that actually people are better at assessing risk and are willing to take risk, but they're also better at measuring the risk and tend to be a lot more successful than the people without that gene. And so you have to think to be willing to give up everything in your home, leave your family behind, and come across to a new world, I guess, is that requires an incredible amount of gumption that your average person doesn't have.
Well, and then the other thing, a lot of times you're not going to do that unless you're forced to do it, right? For financial or economic reasons, you have to be kind of cornered sometimes to do that.
I think just the recognition that, hey, I want to make my life better immediately identifies you as a person that is going to be more successful than the average person. You want to go somewhere, you want to achieve something, you want to create an opportunity for your children. And so these people, take that calculated risk. Of course, coming to America may not be a calculated risk anymore. Our social safety net is massive. So now we may be getting a different group of people than we got originally. The first set of immigrants may be totally different from the last set.
I don't know that it is. Is it massive? I mean, I know that a lot of people you may qualify for food stamps if you're a dependent mother or disabled. So you think our social undernet is massive?
Yeah, compared to the rest of the world, the Chinese, for example, almost have no safety net. So their savings rates are astronomical. They'll save 30 to 50% of their income because there's not the huge social safety net. That's why our taxes are the highest in the world. I think we're number 6 or 7 in the highest taxes in the world.
But our safety net is nothing compared to Europe's with the free health care and with regulated jobs, mandating a certain amount of vacation, et cetera, correct?
Well, but it's but our standard of living's higher, and so having traveled
is.
extensively in Europe, I mean, it's a beautiful place. But the Europeans, they don't. And as far as healthcare quality goes, for well care they do relatively well. But for the average American on a good healthcare plan, we have better medical care than the Europeans do. It's that 30 to 40 million that are kind of in that gap, usually young people that don't have a good job, but aren't, I guess, poor enough to qualify for the Medicaid and that type of care, which is more of a European type of system. But I'd be scared to get on the European system because I have very good health care through the A&M system and access to MD Anderson, some of the best doctors in the world. So the European system scares me, and that's why the Canadians come here for those very important surgeries. They're fine when they've got the flu or something in Canada, but if they've got something important, they're going to come to the U.S. for surgery.
For open heart or any of these back surgeries, et cetera, you mean?
They're not going to do it in Canada. Yeah, they're going to come here.
I guess so. Your argument is that the socialized medicine provides a lot of medical care for basic needs and basic services, right, but not for specialized care or.
Right, right. No, you need the free market. A doctor in Europe will make a third of what a doctor will make here, an anesthesiologist, and so you're not going to get the quality that you get here. Money buys quality, and as far as your best and brightest people are going to go into the profession because they want to make more money and live a better life and provide better for their children. That's just human nature, and so your hope is if you pay enough money, you get the best doctors. And I don't want to go to a doctor making $60,000 a year.
Well, on the other hand, I mean, on the other side of the argument would be somebody on a salary might take more time to look at you, may look more at the human side of you instead of looking at you as a way to make money. There's two sides.
No, that's been proven. The Mayo Clinic, their doctors are on salary, and so when you let the private sector run amok, we saw that in McAllen with the Medicare and Medicaid patients down there. The doctors were just prescribing unnecessary hysterectomies and all kinds of unnecessary procedures to generate money. The difference is the Mayo Clinic pays a very high salary, and they get the best and brightest doctors there, and those doctors are on salary, so they don't have an incentive to practice aggressive wealth-generating medicine. I guess they're already making good money. And so
and we've had a history of unnecessary, like patterns of surgery, maybe tonsils,
right,
maybe gallbladder surgeries now. There's been pattern like cycles of operations that have been income generating that were prescribed, I think.
Yeah, the government has an important role in this. I'm not a laissez-faire capitalist. I think that they need to recognize that perversions can be created in systems that were improperly set up, like the Medicare and Medicaid system, where they maybe weren't paying an adequate amount for certain procedures, and so doctors start padding and doing different things like that.
Oh, certainly. I remember some years ago it was that I'd seen that these why do doctors committing Medicaid fraud? They were getting paid $25 for a patient visit.
Right.
I said, well, how's that going to? You can't hardly shake somebody's hand if you're maintaining an office with, whatever, a nurse or two secretaries or something, and you can't hardly shake their hands and say goodbye for that amount of money.
You've got to just generate money. And that's the European system. They have 15 women in one room giving birth, whereas here you have your private room and the guy gets to sit on a couch while it's happening.
We recently had undergone some boom here due to an oil boom, due to what's called fracking, which is a new way, I guess, to extract or pump oil out of the ground. And now with the, I'm going to brag, I think I told a friend of mine that I said, I need to short oil because he's all in the market and all this. I said, I need to short oil because they're fracking all over the world, and it's going to go way down. Yeah. And I was right. Of course, I didn't invest because I don't have the time to follow all that stuff. But I was right. But then someone tells me that the oil boom, the oil bust, and the cheap gas we have now which a friend of mine was telling me that it's actually cheaper than it was in the 60s, adjusted for inflation.
Adjusted for inflation, this is
right?
In all commodities do that over time. Inevitably, technology reduces the cost of any commodity, whether it's food, oil, whatever it is.
Well, food is an interesting one because for years they were talking about population control because according to Malthus, that incrementally the food wasn't going to increase, and we've seen now that food is actually very inexpensive.
Well, Malthus could be right if the Malthusians are right in communist China or North Korea, where originally they didn't have the markets to compete, and so.
But what you're saying hasn't really been.
Shortage.
But what you're saying doesn't seem to have proven true, like in the gold commodity or maybe silver. It seems like those are always kept.
On an inflation-adjusted basis, gold is relatively cheap.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
okay, so it works.
Think about the prices back in the early 1900s. I think because in the early 1900s it had a lot more value as a commodity, as far as trade and monetary.
It had more use probably too than it does
right.
now. Now they have all these other.
But yeah, gold would have has been a horrible investment over time because it's dramatically underperformed the markets.
Well, a lot of people have gold because they have an inherent fear of the nature of governments or the stability of governments, and therefore I'm going to have gold, so I'll always have something, even if the banks close, etc.
Yeah, I made that mistake. I bought a lot of gold in the mid '80s.
Did you do that? You fell for that one?
It took me 30
Those
years
guys
to get my
smart.
money out of it.
Those guys are smart, man. They got new tricks all the time. So we're talking about oil and fracking, and I tell you, my own practice as an attorney had a little bit of a boom from this because you had the guys in the oil field and they had the money to pay for their own attorneys. So I do criminal cases, and so they had the money for the DWIs to defend their people. And I didn't have to advertise additionally for those clients, et cetera. So, but now I know I've talked to so many men that have lost their jobs in the oil field. So I guess our economy now is undergoing a little bit of a what would you say, readjustment?
Yeah, but I think my understanding is it's going to be a good transition because of this cheap gas here. We're getting companies like Cheniere doing a $14 billion development to.
But that's
export
cheap
LNG.
natural gas, right?
Right. Cheap. Well,
Okay.
that's what we're getting out of South Texas is a lot of that natural gas, along with the oil and the condensate. Tianjin Pipe Company. We're talking thousands upon thousands of manufacturing jobs that are going to be brought to the coastal bend just because of this cheap energy and manufacturing facilities. Anybody that needs heat, whether it's for plastic, metal, whatever it is, they're looking at us now. And so I think, though on the production side, we're getting hurt because it's cheap. On the end user side, I think it's really going to benefit South Texas, and so I see a lot of blue collar jobs being created here for these people. So
How do you rectify? Can you have a town, and you have some degree of sophistication, having traveled a lot, and being a professor of finance, can you rectify a town to be a manufacturing town and a resort town at the same time? I'm not certain that I know of one. I know I was raised in a manufacturing town in the north, steel, tire, rubber, auto, etc. But it really wasn't known at that time. It really wasn't known for its scenic beauty at that time.
I don't consider Corpus a resort town compared to the resorts I've been to.
Well, that's interesting too.
I think it's a weekend destination. It's not a
resort
not a
town.
True
well, we have resort towns. Well, Port Aransas is probably a resort town, and
bit
perhaps
more, yeah,
Rockport, etc.
Yeah, I think they're off the beaten. They're out of the. I just see a lot of industrial activity increasing here, so it's going to diminish the resort appeal when you see that industrial activity. But wealth-wise, when we think about hardworking high school graduates getting jobs, we're going to have a lot of jobs for those people here over the next probably 15 to 20 years, and I think it's going to dramatically benefit those groups. Right now I was looking at you were talking about Dr. Lee's work. The Coastal Bend our people have some of the worst credit scores and some of the worst banking history just because of the suspect job market we've been in and the ups and downs this economy's been through. I think over the next decade, we may start stabilizing that. And you see these people that are kind of on the edge starting to do very well. And so your clients will reappear.
Okay, so you're stating that we are going to be experiencing a boom primarily in the manufacturing industries as a result of the cheap energy.
I pulled down some of the stuff from our economic development agencies around here, and just looking at the number of manufacturing entities coming in. And those are the type of ones we want. The retail side, that's just recirculating stuff within the economy. You want to create these jobs like refineries where we bring a product in, we refine it, and then we sell it somewhere else and bring new money into the economy. Fresh blood. And so these manufacturing entities are really going to be valuable.
Well, we've discussed before, though, there's and I said, Pope Francis said something about, that I disagreed with, in a way, because a lot of times prosperity does bring, those jobs bring pollution. Air pollution, pollution of the ground.
But I think that, and we're looking at China. China is where we were in the early 1900s with their industrialization, and I've been over there, and everybody's coughing. Here in the U.S., so you see that as we become wealthier, you reach a point where you're about as comfortable and happy as you can be, and then you want to breathe clean air. But there is no doubt about it, industrialization actually brings longevity. Just look at Africa, where you got 30, 40-year life expectancies. Americans, Europeans, highly industrialized nations, Japan, the people live longer. And because we're able to provide the monetary resources for health care, and inevitably the people start cleaning up the environment too. So it's a process you go through. And so I really don't want to go back to living in pollution-free caves, personally. I think we're better off with a little bit of pollution.
And I know, and then that's the dichotomy we're in. When they're talking about, jobs. We need to promote jobs. Well, it's true, but when the left says they want high-paying jobs, and then the left says, but we want this cleanest environment in the world. Well, I don't know that you could have both.
You can't have both. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got, it's a balance, and I think nobody knows what the right answer is. It's just somewhere in the middle. We want to be able to breathe.
So right now, I mean, since I've been in Corpus Christi, I think that other than maybe maybe a period in the 80s at first, but I think unemployment is statistically low in this area and has been low for many years. Isn't that right?
It is, yeah. I mean, I think Corpus is, despite itself, is benefiting from this huge windfall and will be. Now, the unemployment rate is somewhat meaningless because people talk about, the Obama's cut unemployment now. Actually, the reason unemployment is low is because a lot of people just quit looking for work. What you look at is the total employment rate, the number of people that are capable of working, that are in the labor market working. And we're at our lowest levels since the 1970s in that. And so families outside of the coastal bend, outside of Texas, have been hammered. Where Texas is an anomaly.
The coasts. I know. I have a friend on the East Coast and a couple of friends on the West Coast, and it seems like they're not in very good situations.
No,
the East and West Coast.
Outside of these energy-producing areas in the United States, Texas pretty much carried the U.S. economy, and over the last few years, and we may continue to carry it as these European and Asian companies locate here. Voestalpine, all these manufacturing companies are coming here because our natural gas is about a third of the price that Europeans pay for natural gas. And so they can come here, do the manufacturing, the steel manufacturing and all that. And so I see a lot of opportunity for working people here. And then for attorneys too, I guess is the.
I hope so.
I also see a lot of work.
How about professors?
Yeah.
How's Texas A&M Corpus Christi doing these days?
We're growing, and I think we'll just continue to grow.
You have a good marketing campaign over there.
And what happens is people get these blue collar jobs, but they want more for their children, and
Absolutely.
so they push them through, and they can afford the college.
Of course. They're under the impression that the white collar world is a lot better than what it is.
Yeah.
That's what and I could say that from I'm saying that anecdotally from my parents. Mm-hmm. There is almost a romanticization of the white collar world. Like, you dress up, you'll be in a suit, and you won't have to work so hard. But the reality of the white collar world to me is that you have to work much harder, and you're under much more stress. And it's not always remunerative either. I mean, right? Is that right?
It's tough. Yeah. No, going to work 9 to 5 and just having a clear set of physical activities you got to do is just not, in my opinion, is not that stressful. I enjoy physical labor.
That's right. I know other white collar. I know people in business.
All this reading gives me a headache.
That's right. I know a lot of us for relaxation. If I had more time, I'd work on if I didn't have to practice law on the weekends, I'd just work on my lawns and properties that have a lot of fun. You know?
I think of all the stuff attorneys have got to read. It's just like professors. You've got to try to figure out what it's saying. It's difficult to interpret or understand. I mean, it is. It's challenging and stressful.
You know.
But
well, and then we used to say this when I was in college. I don't know if you said it too. We all said, I like people. I want to work with people. Did you say that?
Yeah.
Okay, and then tried working with people. You know, I'd rather work with a machine. Yeah. You know, I'd rather work with a press that doesn't talk back.
Well, that's why I got a math degree.
Well, that's right. That's right. But you're
I'm not a people person.
well, it's my understanding that rumor has it that these evaluations of professors in schools now are very important. A professor told me that they're very important, and that unless you have a certain amount of diplomatic skills and whatever, that you may find yourself poorly ranked by the students and out of a job. Where I was at school, that didn't count. What we thought of the professors didn't mean anything.
Yeah, the quality and rigor of education has gone down substantially, mainly to cater to everybody gets a ribbon mentality of the millennials. They think they deserve an A in every class, and to get their money and to get the state's matching money, we're doing a huge disservice to these people. We're going to have people that just really aren't qualified to handle a lot of this, and so we'll have to bring in Asian students to run all the complicated things. We won't have Americans that are capable of doing it.
Well, we have this great immigration, always occurring in the United States. I guess when we needed labor, we brought over primarily a lot of Southern Europeans.
It's a lifeblood of the economy. Yeah, it's a lifeblood of the, and that's a big mistake we're making now. Is we really need to keep those people here. They come, get this education, they get the doctorates, engineers, computer scientists, all these jobs that Americans aren't qualified to do because they don't have the technical and math skills to do them. Problem is, we send them back home. And we need to keep them here because they'll buy a house, and our construction workers will be able to build their house.
Maybe you could talk about this, and this is just based upon my experience. I don't know if I had a son or daughter who wanted to go into engineering. I don't know if I think much of the fields, because through my years I've seen tremendous unemployment in various engineering fields. They'll all be laid off, and it seems like you have to work for someone, and you're kind of a wage slave, wherein maybe if you're a doctor or a lawyer, you can go into business for yourself. But in these engineering fields, it doesn't seem like they're particularly well paid for the skill level and the difficulty of the degree. Is it?
Well,
do you agree,
to some degree, to some degree, I think that's right. But on average, they're going to make more money than most people, and so
certainly
they're doing as well or better than most everybody out there. But yeah, no, it's a difficult. I mean, in the medical profession, you're seeing it being starting to be dominated by a lot of these Asian students. And what we need to do is, if you get a PhD here or an MD or any of these higher level degrees, we probably need to give you a work visa to let you stay here, and so we can benefit, and it'll lower the cost of everything we do. The American Medical Association tries to limit that, and they want to keep competition down.
Yeah, they very. It's my impression what they do is they have a set number of limited doctors, and then they can control their doctors. Then they could bring in the doctors they need to keep the numbers limited, where they're not going to build all the schools and flood the market. This way they could incrementally incrementally adjust the number of doctors.
Right. Yeah, and you were talking about the white collar deal. The one advantage to the white collar, and like I tell these finance students that I'm educating, you can have the opportunity if you're a good allocator of capital, like Warren Buffett, for example. Like he said, during caveman times, he'd have been eaten by a dinosaur. He just happens to live in a time where guys that are really good at allocating capital can become very wealthy, creating wealth. And so I guess your opportunity to white collar position versus and we look in the law profession, for example, the opportunity to become like Thomas J. Henry, incredibly wealthy, in this profession. You wouldn't have that same profession, same opportunity running a backhoe at a local construction site. And so that is the benefit of the white collar, the skewness in your income can be substantial.
But the law profession has changed drastically since they've allowed all this advertising, wherein you have people who are running businesses and they're not actually even practicing law. So it's not that model is a little bit askew in the legal profession right now, where even your talent as an attorney isn't as important as your ability to market.
Right.
That's an askew.
But that's true in every profession.
I don't know that. I don't know in the medical profession it's as true either, because they have the numbers lowered, or there's more social. There's more social pressure for them not to advertise, at least in a grand manner or a bold manner. So I don't know that the attorneys are necessarily representative of the white collar field in the same way the engineers and the school teachers or the.
But doctors do the same thing. They a lot of the really wealthy doctors don't practice medicine anymore. They've developed these big practices, and they have people under them that whether they're running a big chain
right?
of running a big chain of these minor emergency doc in the box deals, or a nephrology, kidney dialysis clinic, or a lot of these guys are, they're allocators of capital, and they're leveraging their time. So they're not in there seeing patients. They recognize I can make a lot more money if I can hire a whole group of people and take a little bit off the top of every one of them, and so that's capitalism. The ability to allocate resources effectively to generate wealth for yourself.
And so we were talking about the oil issue, and then I noticed that I believe it's Dr. Jim Lee. Also, he's at the Texas A&M Corpus Christi. What's his position?
He's a
Texas A&M Corpus Christi.
Yeah, he's a professor of economics, and he runs our economic development center there. But he's one of the more brilliant guys on our campus.
He's been on the show before, and he talks about a local healthcare dilemma. I don't know if you're familiar with that, wherein he states that healthcare accounts for more than 17% of America's total spending.
No, we've got a nightmare going on here with diabetes. In fact, I had a student that works for Medtronics I ran into last night, and he said that you're almost better off to have AIDS than diabetes, because I guess we're coming up with a solution for the AIDS problem, and so this diabetes problem, health problem, is huge. They're talking about this next generation may not live as long, and it's gonna really hurt our economy because those are deadweight costs.
Since you mentioned it, I mean, I'll see when I was in grade school, you might see one overweight child, and then awful, but they'd be teased, humiliated, right? Oh, you're fat, this and that. Maybe two, but one. Now, when you see the kids waiting for the buses, you see so many overweight children, and so that and that's another thing. I really don't always believe the propaganda in the health system. Generally, there's statistics and facts. So when they're saying everybody's living longer and longer, I mean, obviously for this newest generation, I don't know that
they may not. Yeah, they may not live as long. We may need a taqueria tax, is what we may need, because of the unhealthy food. A McDonald's and
it's funny.
Kentucky Fried Chicken tax.
So you're inferring that that's what's causing
no, it's a
the
sin.
diabetes.
I mean, we have sin taxes, and sin taxes are successful. The smoking. They've shown that raising taxes on cigarettes.
I'm not a big advocate of the sin taxes of smoking and alcohol, etc., because I think a lot of those people are truly addicted, and I don't know that it's necessarily fair to
I'm
charge them
addicted
for
to
addiction.
food myself.
Well,
It's a daily struggle. Not to go into the taqueria and eat everything on that they've got there.
well, you don't get sick of. I gotta tell you,
I think we
I
ought to
get
put
sick of tacos myself. I got sick of them lately.
Oh,
I
it's
don't
the
know.
chips at the beginning. They need to put a $5 tax on every basket
So
of
you
chips
believe?
they
So
serve.
Mr. Free Enterprise believes in controlling markets through
No,
taxation
I'm not a
of
laissez-
food, maybe through the gallon. What about those gallon drinks?
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, maybe you see a eight ounce glass, they'd hand you a soda, right?
No, I'm not a laissez-faire capitalist.
Okay.
I think there's more. We need some intelligent regulation of markets. Intelligent regulation. Which
So what
among
about
politicians, that's very difficult.
were you
to do.
against? I think that the President Obama's administration was condemned because I think they put in place that they're supposed to print the caloric amounts on the food at, say, McDonald's.
And that's perfect. That is
I think-
exactly what.
Okay,
the
so you
government
don't
should
have
do.
a problem with that.
No,
I don't have a problem with
they
that
should
either.
give us
What's that
information.
cost them?
Yeah, well, they should give us the information to make an intelligent decision. When everything's obscure and opaque, you can't make an intelligent decision. I think it's great. I walk in. I'm more likely to go to eat at McDonald's now. I feel more comfortable knowing
Okay.
that I can control my calorie intake.
Have you know?
on the
Do you
menu.
know? So let's say this, and I'm putting
And
you
it's
on the
not child abuse anymore to take your kid there. It used to be child abuse to take your kid to McDonald's.
Well, I do find that people of a lower educational level are often more inclined to abuse their children out of ignorance of what they give them, etc. And I don't know, I don't know if that is it strictly because I go back and forth on these issues. I know my not formally educated grandparents had all this common sense where they wouldn't serve. They had no formal education to speak of, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, they were literate, but
Right.
but they had no education formally to speak of. But they wouldn't feed their kids snacks or candies or sodas. There was a horse sense that was very prominent then. So I don't know that it's even an educational issue. It's like a foolishness issue or
Well,
goof.
It is an educational issue. Yeah, I mean, and they look at that. Obesity and diabetes rates are predominantly a low income, lower educated.
But is there
problem.
is I don't know. Is there a difference between like people of lower socioeconomic status may be different than lower person of low education, a modest means, working hard? I don't know. Isn't it more complicated? It's a values issue. It's a self-respect issue.
I think the government encourages it because they've changed the way the old food stamp system pretty much used to be vegetables.
I didn't know that.
And now it's now with that Lone Star card, you can pretty much buy anything you want. And it was highly restricted on what you could buy, and they're going, oh well, that's
I didn't know that.
discriminatory.
I didn't
But
know
I think
that.
when you give someone a benefit, you should be able to tell them how to use it.
I've discussed with a friend of mine. I said, well, why don't they give them these Lone Star cards and let them buy staples, rice, hamburger, generic? Why would you allow
there's
them?
a whole group of people that think that that's unethical or immoral to tell them they can't buy potato
Pre-made
chips.
hamburgers or
Potato chips.
I mean that's ridiculous,
They
right?
buy, my understanding is they can buy a wide variety of processed foods. And vegetables have no preference anymore. Staples, commodities have no preference anymore. But if you limited it,
I mean
to
that would make sense, right?
yeah, but the government is encouraging that. They're creating a giant bureaucracy around it, and then they're going to create a health crisis that they will then need to administer. And so
Well, I told
it'll be
you
another VA.
Well, before the show, I said something that I never heard anybody say, that the vast conspiracy of all time, that the government actually wants people to abuse alcohol and or drugs. And I was telling you that Aldous Huxley said that it would be easier to control the populations through, I think he referred to it as narco-hypnosis and or through through propaganda and social regulation, than it would be through terror and fear and beating people up and torture. So, but I don't think there's any objective criteria for that. But it's similar to what you're saying about food. I don't know.
I just think it's just the political motivations. I don't know if there's a giant conspiracy. It just so happens that that's the end result of a bureaucracy, is creating growing your bureaucracy and growing your power through growing your bureaucracy. Rather than solving the problem, you create a permanent problem that you can administer. And if everybody quits using drugs, then there's a whole group of people out there that'll be out of work. And so,
Well, I will say this. I mean, I make a percentage of my living through representing people using drugs or dealing drugs, et cetera. But I don't know any criminal defense attorney. Basically, most of us will say legalize the drugs, even though you could argue that we're making money through that manner. But we're not necessarily. Most people have more of a conscience. At least the lawyers that I know, as bad a reputation as we have more of a conscience. We go, what good is this doing? You've got all these people in prison. You've got where does a economist see? Where's a professor of finance in his courses? Does he teach anything about the markets of drug use and what it's doing to the economy? Is there a real cost to the economy as a result of people being addicted to drugs and alcohol? How is that formulated, or is that discussed?
actually, the Europeans are probably better, been a lot more effective at assessing that, and they actually place a cost on every drug in society because they're documenting it through their system, and believe it or not, alcohol is one of the more costly drugs. You think of heroin and those things; they're very bad. I think at the very bottom of the list was mushrooms. So we ought to
You mean like
encourage.
psilocybin?
Yeah, the hallucinogenic
Yeah.
mushrooms. We ought to encourage mushroom use.
Well,
Well, the opiate.
those are free. Those guys. Those are free.
Nobody makes money.
And I don't know that I don't know that you want to be doing too many psilocybin. Let's tell people that.
The opiate problem is the big problem out there in Middle America, and so you're seeing the drug use and housewives is getting ridiculous with OxyContin and all that stuff. But who knows?
Well, my understanding is I had somebody who was in charge of the security of the public schools in Corpus Christi, and he said that these students, one of the problems is prescription drugs. Mm-hmm. They get all these prescription drugs, and then some of them are given drugs themselves. These students for ADHD, et cetera.
Right.
So they get the drugs. Their parents get the drugs, and so it's actually. And then sometimes they're able to buy them from online. I guess those sort of drugs. So it's actually those sort of drugs that you're talking about, hydrocodone, et cetera, that are the bigger problem in the high schools right now.
Yeah, and I don't know. Rand Paul is the libertarian side. I do see that we may want to decriminalize it, but we have to definitely watch it and treat it. Just to say, hey, you can use all the drugs you want and it's no big deal. I think it's definitely a cost, and so I do believe there needs to be some kind of control over it. The question is, how do we handle it? Do we throw everybody in jail, or do we come up with an alternative that may be more effective? And
Well, you talk about these jails as an argument that I made recently in discussion, which nobody ever, I don't think, intelligently talks about, is that, this whole prison system and prosecutor system and maybe defense lawyer system and judges system, it's the cost is so ridiculous. And as you state, I don't know who's doing it, but I think these phrases, it's an elastic number. All they have to do is they could increase the sentences, hire more prosecutors, increase the number of crimes, and you could have everybody in prison.
yeah.
And the percentage of people in prison right now is very high, allegedly
Well,
the largest in the world in America.
Keep us all safe. We'll just lock everybody up. We can eliminate crime completely.
Well, and then there's their argument that it has worked to a certain extent. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, no, I think I think it probably is effective. You just got to find the balance out there. It's gotten a little ridiculous. We incarcerate 25% of the world's of the world's prisoners, I think, are in the U.S., and so it's a bizarrely high number.
And there's no thought of it by. I've been in courtrooms before, maybe a federal courtroom in particular, and the judge will act like they're really doing something by giving this huge prison sentence. And I said, well, okay, you're really doing something. Everybody in this courtroom is now going to live the rest of their lives to pay taxes to keep him in prison. I mean, 10 years wasn't good enough. It's got to be 40, right?
No, something needs to be done. And they blame it on the plea bargain system, I think, is what they're saying. The Europeans and a lot of these other countries don't have a plea bargain system, where a lot of, in the U.S., innocent people go to jail to avoid the risk of of appearing in court and then getting a huge sentence, and so they negotiate.
We do. We do, but I thought that was actually responsible for getting lighter sentences, because on some of these crimes, the juries will be pretty.
Oh yeah, that's
pretty tough.
But that's the. But if you ran everybody into the courtroom and had everybody, then we may re-examine the process.
Well, certainly, because the judges couldn't. The number of judges, if everybody had to try a case, the number of judges would have to increase 100-fold, 1,000-fold, because unless you would increase the efficiency of the jury system, wherein now it's rather cumbersome, the way they come in physically initially, if that could be expedited somehow. It doesn't seem like the judicial system is anxious necessarily about becoming automated or mechanized in the same way that the free enterprise does.
Yeah, the jury system scares me as much as the political system when people are voting on stuff. Sometimes I trust the judge more than the jury.
The other thing we were talking about is economic. That Mr. Jim Lee had talked about was economic disparity in the coastal Bend area, wherein he seemed that there was and he was talking about economic disparity amongst ethnic groups. Hispanic workforce, number of females has been growing, and that the perception of much of the Hispanic population across the nation is the outcome of the arrival of Hispanic immigrants, and that we have these great disparities, a lot of it's between those with a college degree and not, et cetera, and it seems to be unusually high. After adjusting for inflation, a typical Hispanic or black family earned less income and built less wealth in 2013 than 2 decades before, which I assume would be, 1993.
Obama has been the worst president since Jimmy Carter for minorities. Black families, Hispanic families, median family income has actually dropped during his administration. Ronald Reagan and Bill
And why
Clinton.
do they keep saying he was a socialist on the radio? I'm just teasing.
Well, socialism hurts the poor because socialism makes everybody a little poorer across the board because you eliminate the free markets to create wealth. It makes everybody a little poorer across the board, but the ones at the bottom become much worse off. And if you're making $1 million a year and now you're only making $500,000 a year, you're still doing pretty good. But if you're making $20,000 a year and you go to $10,000 a year, you're hurting. You're going from protein to nothing basically in your diet, and so under Obama he's actually we looked at the end of the Bush administration, the economy had actually turned and it started going back up, and so they kind of turned it around right at the end of the Bush administration. Obama managed to somehow destroy that progress and send it in the other direction. So when we look at median family income, Jimmy Carter, President Obama have been the worst presidents since, across the board, since the Great Depression.
But that's, it's obviously hard. It's obviously not truthful to say that we know for certain that it was caused by their policies. I remember in the Carter administration, I don't know what was driving all those shortages. There were toilet paper shortages. Remember shortages? I don't know. Was he driving that somehow economically? I don't think so.
And Carter only had one shot at it. Obama's had 8 years, though. So I think we can put this one on him.
Well, a lot on the left aren't necessarily happy with Obama either because of his continuation of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And even though he says he's pulled out, he really hasn't. And a lot of us, there's been no peace dividend. There's been involvement in obviously Libya, Syria, etc. So a lot on the left aren't happy with him either. How is that a function of the inefficiency of his administration to make prosperity? If we're spending a certain percentage of our money on the military-industrial complex.
I think we've learned an important lesson from President Obama, and that is you don't want a rookie senator from a state that all they've done is manage some civic groups to become the president of the United States and an adjunct professor of law.
Well, they're running for president now. They're running for somebody now. The Republicans are running a man who has less experience, Dr. Ben Carson, who's never even been a senator or a congressman or anything other than a doctor, never even ran his business
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Trump. How about the experiences of Donald Trump? Is he experienced?
Well, yeah. I mean, he's one of the 400 richest men in the world. The guy's obviously is very capable. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but he's far more qualified probably than most of the other candidates to manage something, and I think that's
And I've said that too. He has at least built something.
yeah.
He's built a building, and he's managed it. He's done that.
Well,
Or converted build. At least he's done something. Like I say, I mean, a doctor, you're working within a certain controlled governmental system that you're licensed in, and
Right.
that in a way, I would argue that you're in fact given some degree of a preference in this system.
And that does concern me. Dr. Carson concerns me. Marco Rubio concerns me because of their. We look at Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton. They had already had extensive management experience running states, and then Donald Trump is. He took a small regional real estate business and made it a global name. So. There's a lot of criticism of him. Oh, he's just an entertainer. Well, you don't become one of the 400 richest men in the world being an entertainer.
I'm going to.
So.
This. I shouldn't say this, but when I first saw the first Republican debate I watched, I said, "Well, Trump's going to win
Mm-hmm.
because he gives the simplest answer, and it's an understandable answer, and he demonstrates personality and a friendliness."
Mm-hmm.
And then he didn't repeat a lot of the same right wing stuff. You could just get sick of hearing. Cut taxes for the rich and deregulate. He didn't come up. He doesn't repeat the same archetypical things. I said, and then I said, if he is against Hillary Clinton, he's going to beat Hillary Clinton because so many on the left aren't happy with her voting for the Iraq War, etc. And then some of us, when we hear her talk about, the first thing she talks about in a debate is LGBT rights, etc.,
Right, yeah.
that we're not exactly happy. So I don't know. I think that we'll see if this show is going to be in cyberspace on my YouTube channel. We'll see. I think if Trump versus Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump's going to win because I know too many people that are traditionally liberal going to vote for Trump over
Well, and
Hillary Clinton.
But I do say this. I think this is one of the better presidential races we've had. It's going to be, and I don't.
On the Democratic side, it's been awful. You have one candidate.
Well, yeah.
But in defense of her, she's been running for years.
Right.
So I've never known anybody to do that. So, but she's monopolized.
And she's had some. And I think the benefit of her is her husband is a brilliant guy, and I think he'll help her. And I don't think
that's what the implication is.
I don't think individually she's as competent, but hopefully if she becomes president, she'll listen to him because he's a very sharp guy. When he has his indiscretions, but he's a sharp guy.
Well,
so.
I personally may not obviously approve of the moral indiscretions, but I never saw how that had anything to do with. I thought the Monica Lewinsky story and the way it was handled and publicized, I thought it was awful. I thought it didn't have anything much to do with his running of politics or being the president. And I thought obviously again you may not approve of a married man doing that, but things happen morally.
Yeah, and looking at it, you look back at the most successful presidents have had extensive management experience. From Eisenhower. To Reagan, ran California. Eisenhower ran the war. And I'm looking at Jeb Bush has run Florida, did a very good job there. Kasich, has done a very good job in Ohio.
I'm surprised that he's so. I'm surprised that Kasich is ignored because he seems to be have a middle view and seems to speak very well. When I watch that, I say, well, the Kasich is a man,
but he's scowling too much. I think he's not very media savvy.
This is
he may be very competent. He's just not very media savvy.
You're the finance man. How many lawyers and or professionals make it on their personality and their actual skill level isn't very good?
Yeah, well, that's
you know what I'm saying.
That's the problem. Yeah,
I mean, it's like you're supposed to be. Even as a matter of fact, I've thought before when speaking to one of my prospective clients, especially in the criminal milieu, I said, well, I should have probably read books about selling people my services because I'm just stating very factually what I'll do for them, my fees, the way the system works. My skill level in terms of being Mr. Personality
the
aren't very
marketing
good.
skills.
Yeah, they're not that high.
Well, I'm optimistic. I don't see anybody getting elected that won't do a pretty good job. This criticism of Trump appears to be, uh, uh, you know, misguided to some degree. They criticize him, but he's been very successful. I mean,
Well, he does have a tendency to make personal comments about people, and I made the remark. And I said, I guess he'll meet
doesn't
with
have a filter.
he'll meet with President Putin of Russia and say, "Oh, but you're pretty short, aren't you?" Oh, okay,
Yeah. Well,
and two could play it at that game. People could call him names back. Then where you going?
But I think what we fail to realize is he had to get there through interpersonal action. So I think we're shortchanging him there. He's been very successful.
Well, and that's true.
Some of his, he says some off the wall things, but I think once he gets into office, like Obama, realize now that you can't just pull everybody out of Iraq one day. It's not as easily said as done.
Well, okay, but how many? Okay, I got to say this.
He's
Since
just a very poor manager.
How many years you going to be there?
Yeah.
How many years you going to be
well,
there?
Well, yeah, you've got to, you've got to have an intelligent exit strategy. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're in a bad situation.
And Trump called it. We shouldn't have been there to begin with.
Right.
But once we're there, you can't just leave and let the building collapse.
Sooner or later, you got how many? We've been there longer than Vietnam. How many years?
No, it's been a huge drain, a ridiculous mess that we created.
And
maybe we should have just left those dictators in power. Now looking back,
well, Bush Senior knew that. Yeah. I mean, Bush Senior knew that you had to leave him in power.
He was an incredibly intelligent president because he'd run the CIA. He'd already had a lot of experience, and so he recognized that, whereas his son didn't.
So. Well, you know that if you read Bush Senior's background, I mean, he did a lot. Mm-hmm. He was in World War II, and he moved around the country to support his family, and he was really, his credentials were very impressive, Bush Senior's.
He was a brilliant guy. He just had the misfortune of having an economy turn in the third year of his term. So,
but you know what else, though? We talked an awful lot about
everybody
politics.
Everybody knows their pocketbook.
Well, I don't think he ran very hard. After that first term,
he
didn't run very hard.
Yeah, I think he was ill. He had Graves' syndrome. The Graves
well, that could be the reason. I kind of give him a little bit more credit. I think he wasn't that. He said, "Well, I've been president once."
Yeah. Well,
you know what I mean?
Ross Perot
hey,
came in and.
Well, that Ross Perot thing did hurt him.
Otherwise,
I forgot about that. Yeah.
He would have been president had it not been for Ross Perot. He'd have had a second term, and we may not have been in Iraq.
And for those people who don't remember, of course, Ross Perot ran as a third-party candidate, and he garnished a pretty sizable amount of votes, which would have gone to President Bush at that time, and that probably was the result.
And so we probably may not have had the Iraq War, and we may not have had 9/11 because he would have probably been a little more in tune to the intelligence side of it. Clinton missed a lot of signs that were there to stop the.
Of course, 9/11 did happen during Bush Jr.'s administration.
The first part of his term, but it was conspired during the Clinton administration. And so.
Well, I don't know. It did happen. Was it 6 to 9 months into the Bush Jr.'s administration? There was some indicators that he did have that there was going to be a terrorist attack, et cetera, and there really wasn't any.
Well, and Clinton, to his credit, tried to do some stuff. I don't know if y'all remember, but he did run some minor bombing campaigns.
He did, and he supposedly missed.
He recognized that there was something happening. He probably just wouldn't have been as capable as a former CIA director.
So in the long run, I guess you're saying that Corpus Christi has a great deal of favor towards blue-collar, working-class jobs of high school graduates. But where are we going to get that pizzazz in that of Austin and their high-tech industry and Silicon Valley? I guess we're not going to get the sharp college graduates that want to stay in the Corpus Christi area based upon the economic outlook that you had stated.
I'm 5'9". I'm never going to be a pro basketball player. We are what we are.
I think we are.
Try to be something different.
I don't know. Okay. I think we are what we made ourselves through some pretty bad management choices and through some. That's what I believe, based upon common sense issues such as the maintenance of the streets and/or the parks. And you ever done a study on what's happened to all the relatively high taxes that we're taxed in Corpus Christi. What happens to all this money? You're a professor of finance. Maybe you can help us out.
The citizens a lot of times vote for development that would bring in that tax money, though. They vote against it. So development and new companies bring money, and money is what fixes streets. And the reason our tax rates are so high is because our tax base is so small. And in order to have more money to fix streets, you need these big developments on the island. You need these Cheniere Energy coming in. You need these companies coming in. They bring jobs, they bring money, they bring a tax base. And you look at the wealthiest places in Texas and across the United States, their property tax rates are lower than ours because they pull from a bigger pool of money, and they don't have to charge as high taxes. And so if you want lower taxes in Corpus, you need to bring in other people that pay the taxes for you.
We're getting pretty close to the end of the show, and I see you keep having some notes there. Was there something you wanted to cover we haven't covered?
No, I just brought in some of the stuff you mentioned there
buddy,
about the. And that's looking at the list of companies that I had here on the front that are coming to Corpus. I see property taxes going down, and I see streets getting better.
Well,
that's what I see.
That's it.
People
That's a good
criticize our
sign.
politicians, but we've got a lot of smart people running this city, and I think they, as a general rule, they have the best interest of the city and the people at heart. What I'm concerned about is sometimes our voters tend to not have that long-term view of the just like the development along the bayfront or the Sandestin resort on the island. Some of those things that would add to the quality of life. And in these large corporations, when their executives are looking at a place to live, they want to have that quality of life. And so what we're finding is these large companies, their headquarters are staying in Houston and Austin or San Antonio.
Or they're even moving from here.
And they're leaving their operations here.
Whataburger left here. I think
Right,
Exxon had was here and they left.
And so we've got to be intelligent about the infrastructure we put in place to keep these people here and make it a good place to live. But I think the jobs are going to be here on the blue collar side, and we ought to accept what we are, and we ought to, instead of trying to be something different, there's only going to be one Austin. There's only going to be one San Jose and Silicon Valley. And,
Well, it's also true. It's also true. When I moved here, a friend of mine remembers when Corpus Christi was bigger than Austin, and when I moved here 30 years ago, Austin wasn't that much bigger, and now they've taken off. And of the major Texas cities, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Corpus Christi.
Well, they have
Austin,
a geographic. Houston and Austin have a geographic advantage, and San Antonio to some degree, in that they're on a major transit line from coast to coast, and so they're in a strategic location geographically that we don't have.
And then our strategic location in Mexico, though, would seem to have helped us some. And I always say this when I've been in Southern California, and I see it's at the end of the world, and they have the ocean on one side and a desert on the other. I say, hey, they've done a lot here.
Yeah.
It would seem like our
Well,
location.
they're an entry point for Asian markets to enter the U.S.
That's an interesting point too.
So yeah, they've got an advantage. We're next to the largest oil field in the United States. We need to be in the oil and gas and energy business. That's what we need to be in.
Okay, we'll finish up there. Thank you, as always, for coming on, Professor Swint Friday,
Thanks.
Finance Professor, Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Thanks for watching.